Welcome back to the A-Game. I'm Lucas Warren.
I'm Ryan Hendricks.
And I'm Nick Goodman.
March Madness has officially come to a close with the UConn Huskies winning the men's championship against Purdue 70-65. What did you think of the game, and are we seeing a new dynasty forming in Connecticut?
Yeah, UConn, just to start out, dude, they're ridiculous. Winning back-to-back championships, winning every game in the NCAA tournament by 13 points or more. I mean,
2 years.
Well, yeah, 2 years. That's what it's been back-to-back. But yeah, doing that 2 years in a row is absurd. Just to bring up what Purdue did, Zach Edey, he did play great. He had 37 points and a double-double, but UConn made it a point to shut everybody else down. They said, we're going to let Edey have a great game, but we're not going to let all of these other players on Purdue just bomb up threes when we try to go double him. And they did an excellent job stopping everybody else on the Boilermakers team, as Purdue only had one player that scored more than 5 points besides Edey, and they just did a great job running them off the three-point line, making them frustrated on offense. And the Huskies, again, they had a really good team effort from a lot of different guys, ranging from Tristan Newton all the way down to someone like a Cam Spencer. I mean, they're a ridiculous team, and if you're Purdue, you have to have more than Zach Edey going your way. I like to throw this in here too. UConn, with 6 championships since 1999, they're a blue blood. They're blue blood in college basketball. They've been the best team since 1999 in winning championships. And it's good to see that a Big East team is able to do that when it feels like we're surrounded by all these football conferences and all of this money being thrown around with all those schools. Seeing a team from the Big East that doesn't even have a football D1 FBS program right now, seeing a team from there be this dominant is a good thing.
The Power Six is still alive in college basketball. I think UConn proved that.
Yeah, they sure did. And UConn is a blue blood. I mean, if we're going to say Duke's a blue blood with 5 championships, you got to say UConn's now a blue blood with 6. And UConn just completely dominated, as Nick said. Back-to-back years now, just look completely unstoppable. And it wasn't Zach Edey's fault for Purdue. Zach Edey had the best game he could have had. I mean, if you're out putting up 37 points, all those rebounds, completely making Klingon not even look as good as we thought he was. But Zach Edey was doing everything he could. But guys like Foster Loyer and Braden Smith, you can't go ice cold all game long. That's just a shame for the Boilermakers. And then UConn, you have guys like Cam Spencer, the guys you don't even expect to do good, like Spencer. You expect Tristan Newton to do as good. Most outstanding player back-to-back years now. When Cam Spencer's out there cooking you up, you knew it was over. And a great game for UConn. And Purdue, you came oh so close, but not close enough.
Yeah, you guys talked about it, but the way Edey came out of the gates in that game was super impressive. It felt like there was a chance he might just win that game by himself, putting Purdue on his back. And he's a guy that takes pride in playing all 40 minutes, but I feel like there was a point in that first half you could see, the moment started to hit him. He started to lose his breath, and he started to wear down a little bit. But, I mean, he did more than just his patent and get to that left shoulder right hook. He had a little up and under on Klingon. He was looking real crazy. But, yeah, Purdue as a team just let themselves down. They shot 1 for 7 from the three-point line total for the game. This was a team that made 7 threes a game on the season and shot 41% on those threes. So kind of an out-of-character game for them. And at halftime, Dan Hurley talked about it. They were speeding up Purdue, and it felt that way. The offense just never really settled down. It never felt like they were comfortable. Their guard, Braden Smith, had a tough shooting game. He felt rushed throughout the game, and UConn it feels inevitable at this point. They didn't even have a great game. It felt like these last 2 games in the Final Four, they've just kind of sleptwalk into beating both of those teams by double digits. So looking at this UConn team, I just have to ask you guys, 2 totally different rosters from last year to this year. Is it the players winning these championships, or has Hurley just established himself as the best coach in college basketball?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, Dan Hurley, within these last couple of years, has really grown into his role as a head coach of the UConn Huskies. He's done an excellent job with a team that has been in transition from last year to this year with a bunch of different players. But at the same time, talent still wins championships. So UConn wouldn't have been able to do this without players like Klingon, without players like Tristan Newton. But at the same time, I don't think those players would end up at UConn without Dan Hurley.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, because all these players are very talented. Tristan Newton, Donovan Klingon, Alex Caravan. These guys are going to put up buckets every single time they're on the floor. But Dan Hurley, he brings the guys in. He's out there calling the plays. And to be honest with y'all, Kentucky fans, he's not coming there. He's staying at UConn.
Why would he go to Kentucky?
Yeah,
I mean, he's already got a blue blood.
I was going to say, you'd be under too much pressure at Kentucky. If he doesn't go to the Final Four every single year, they're going to be running him out of town like they did with Calipari.
Yeah, no, I mean, I look at it, and I agree with you guys. I think it's a little bit of both, because you just look at the talent that UConn has produced the last few years. You guys talk about the players this year, but look at the team last year. Jordan Hawkins was a high draft pick. I believe he was a lottery pick for the Pelicans. You have Andrew Jackson, who's getting minutes for the Milwaukee Bucks. That was a very talented team last year. It's just very shocking. Not many teams do it twice, and to do it with the ease that they did it just was surprising to me. And I think, best college basketball coach right now, Dan Hurley.
Well, guys, let's take a look at the more exciting NCAA championship, because the women's NCAA basketball championship was also played over this past weekend, with South Carolina beating Iowa 87-75. What are your thoughts on this game, and how has the women's game soared to new heights this season?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I do think it is the more fun tournament of the two. You had way more fun names. You had players like Juju Watkins. I mean, that Final Four was awesome. And, the men's side just didn't compete. But looking at what Caitlin Clark did, I mean, she's a legend to this game. And you just look at Iowa, they were so reliant on her. She took 44% of the shots in that national championship game. And it felt actually very similar to Purdue versus UConn. This team with this one star player that is hoping to put a team on their back, but this other team that just has so much talent and just felt inevitable. The way Caitlin Clark came out of that game in the first quarter, you thought maybe she can take over and just win this game by herself, a lot like she did against LSU. But just looking at some of these numbers, for Iowa, they had 0 bench points, 0 for 3 on those shots in 18 minutes. For USC, they had 37 bench points, 15 for 27 in 75 minutes. The rebounding plus 22 for USC. Caitlin Clark's the best player in women's basketball, but USC is by far the best team in women's basketball, and they proved it in the national championship game.
Yeah, just going off what Lucas said about this NCAA tournament on the women's side being more entertaining, I feel like that was reflected in the ratings, as this was the highest rated NCAA women's basketball game on record. You love to see it for the growth of the women's side of basketball. As for the game itself, Iowa's a great team, but Iowa was obviously put to this point through Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark is the best player in the whole country. She helped will this team all the way to a championship. But at the same time, South Carolina, there's a reason they finished the year undefeated. There's a reason that they're an undefeated national champion. That did not happen by accident, and that's because they have depth. They have players all throughout their roster that can get it done, not just a player or two that can play well. They have a ton of depth, and that just kind of reflected in this game. Iowa outscored South Carolina in the first quarter, but in every other quarter, South Carolina got stronger and outscored Iowa. You can see that in some stats too, as South Carolina decisively out-rebounded the Iowa Hawkeyes. And beyond that, they also had 37 bench points. The Iowa Hawkeyes had 0. So South Carolina, I mean, they had some standout players, of course. Cardoso in particular, I felt like played really well. It felt like by the end of the game, she was getting every single rebound to keep things going and try to knock out any sort of hope that the Iowa Hawkeyes could have. But just to conclude on this, the Iowa Hawkeyes, they did have the best player in all of college basketball on the women's side. South Carolina had the best team.
Yeah, Nick, to play off your point, it's not just the depth for South Carolina, it's the coaching. Dawn Staley, the best coach in all of women's basketball. She showed why. I didn't think, honestly, I had Iowa as my national champion in my bracket. I just didn't think South Carolina will be able to do it. I saw them play in the SEC title game. They had to escape versus Tennessee. I didn't think they were going to do it. They proved me wrong completely. They just looked dominant in almost every single game. Got scared once versus Indiana, but outside of that, they looked amazing through the whole playoffs. And then going into Caitlin Clark in the final, Caitlin Clark did her thing. She scored 30 points. She looked as amazing as she always does. But just the team did not help her. It was almost the Edey effect, as Lucas mentioned a second ago. This one player just comes out to a hot start, but then at the end of the day, someone has to step up to help him. And it just didn't come. And it's a shame because Caitlin Clark's now going to get looked at, and they're going to look back at the one thing she didn't do, which is win that title.
You talk about the coaching staff for South Carolina, and I agree. They're fantastic, and they're very stylish. The Gucci.
Oh yeah.
I like the suits. I don't know. One of the coaches had a shirt, just a plain white T-shirt that said "Gucci, I love you." I don't know if that's coach etiquette. Maybe throw a jacket on, maybe a little more. But you talked about the Hawkeyes needing another score, and that was Hannah Skulke throughout the tournament. The sophomore center had a great tournament, 2 double-doubles, 23 points versus versus UConn, and she looked like she was going to be that second scorer in the second quarter. She had a couple buckets in a row, but the size and just depth, like Nick talked about, of USC just swallowed her after a certain amount of time, and she finished the game with only 11 points, 3 rebounds. But where does college basketball go in your eyes? Do the eyes go to WNBA now that Caitlin Clark's getting drafted, or do you see this as, college basketball is now the thing?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, I think unfortunately it's going to go to some of the eyes just go to the WNBA now just because of the star power that Caitlin Clark brings. I mean, if you have a player that's pulling up from the logo in every single game, people are going to want to watch that. And as much as sad as it is for women's college basketball, they're probably not going to get nearly as many eyes on it next year because Caitlin Clark is leaving. I hope I'm wrong, but I think the WNBA is going to get more eyes now that Caitlin's going up there.
Yeah, I have to agree with Ryan. I mean, I feel like NCAA women's basketball will not go away. I feel like there's still going to be a lot of people that care about the NCAA women's basketball tournament and games next year. But Caitlin Clark was the big draw clearly in this tournament. Her games got the best ratings. I feel like that could be a monumental thing for the WNBA to help that league grow. But moving from the WNBA to the NBA, the NBA playoffs are set to begin next week with teams still fighting to secure a spot in the postseason. Which teams are going to make the playoffs? And do you expect a lot of excitement this postseason?
Yeah, I think we're set up for a great playoffs. It's kind of like last year where even though Denver, they won last year pretty dominantly, it feels like a lot of teams have a chance and, feel like they can win this one. There's 3 real races to look at right now as we're heading into the final 4 or 5 games of the regular season. 6 through 9 in the West, the Phoenix Suns are in 6, Pelicans 7, Kings 8, Lakers 9. Only 1 game separates all those teams. In the East, number 3 through 7, which is big because both of those races involve play-in aspects. So in the East, you have the Magic at 46 and 32, the Knicks at 4, Cavaliers 5, Pacers 6, 76ers 7, red hot with Joel Embiid, and the Miami Heat at 43 and 35. So only 3 games separating all those 6 teams. And then the top of the West is still being competed. Timberwolves 54 wins, Nuggets 54 wins, Thunder 53 wins. It's going to be interesting because usually you see jockeying at the end of the NBA season, but because there's so many races still going on, you kind of lose the ability to jockey if you're some of these teams because you don't know where these teams are going to finish in the standings. I really look at that East race as, it could be anywhere from the Knicks and Cavaliers playing first round. You could see Milwaukee dip into this group as they've just gone on a huge skid. You could see the 76ers, who looked, completely dead. Now it's Joel Embiid back, rise into the top 6 out of the play-in. So there's a lot of unpredictability still to show in these last 4 days of the NBA regular season.
Yeah, the East League's very fun right now, as you said, Lucas. I think that the Knicks, they're going to stay at that 3 seed. I know you don't want it. I know you want to see the Cavs, but I think they're going to move. I think they're going to move just ahead of the Magic out there. Now, looking right at the play-in spot, I agree with you. I think the Sixers are going to move out of that play-in and move into the 6th seed. I have the Pacers falling out right now. I think their star power lacks just a little bit compared to the other teams. Still a very solid team, very well coached. I think they're going to fall out of this top 6 and go into the play-in, however. Now looking at the West, hey, look at them Lakers. They're right back where we expected them to be. They're looking pretty hot right now. But as y'all told me a little bit ago, it doesn't look like they're going to make it out the play-in. But even if they don't, I still think they're going to be very dangerous come playoff time because there's so much talent. Anthony Davis is finally playing the way he's supposed to be. LeBron's in his last couple years of playing, he's going to step up big time for these playoffs. So even though they probably won't make it out the play-in, I think they're going to be very dangerous come playoff time.
Yeah, just going off of both of these guys said, all 10 teams have already secured either a playoff or a play-in berth guaranteed, but there's still a lot of movement that can go on. My big hot take that I have is I feel like the Milwaukee Bucks, even though they've clinched a spot in the top 6, I think they're falling all the way down to the 4th seed. I think the Magic are going to jump in front of them. And then the Cavs have an easy schedule. They play like 2 teams that are looking at the lottery at this point. So I feel like the Cavs will even jump them. And then I think it'll be Knicks at 5. I've got Sixers at 6, as Ryan said. I have them jumping the Pacers. And then Heat, then Bulls, then Hawks. For the West, I think the Denver Nuggets will jump up to be the 1 seed because I feel like they have an easier schedule and they're going to go for it. So then the Timberwolves will be at 2. After that, the 3 seed I have is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Then the 4 seed, I have the Clippers, then the Mavs. Then I have the Pelicans at 6. Then the Suns, the Kings, the Lakers, and the Warriors. The Western Conference is ridiculous. All 10 of those teams are starting to figure it out. Even the Warriors, who looked like they were struggling for a big chunk of the year, have really turned it on late in the season. The East, I feel like, is very clearly Boston is at a whole nother level compared to everyone in that conference. I mean, the Bulls and the Hawks, they're lucky to even be in a position where they can make the playoffs. They've lost more games than they've won.
Yeah, it's the inaugural 9-10 East matchup of the Atlanta Hawks and the Chicago Bulls. They just love that game. That's what they build that team for. But, looking at the Lakers, that's what everybody wants to talk about, and they have a chance to get to that 6th seed. But if you're the Lakers, kind of looking at that top 3, who would you want to face at that top 3? You have Denver, you have the Timberwolves, you have the Thunder. Who would you want in that matchup?
I mean, if I'm being honest, there's not really a team there where it's like, oh, I need to play this team because all those teams are quality. If I had to lean to anybody, though, it would probably be the Minnesota Timberwolves just because Karl Anthony Towns, we don't know the status of him heading into that series. And that's a big turning point versus playing the Denver Nuggets, which is probably the last team you want to play at this point. And the Oklahoma City Thunder, even though they're young, they're healthy, and they're playing really good basketball. So I'd probably lean Minnesota, but that's still not like an easy, I need to play this team. This team's clearly the favorite.
Yeah, out of any of them, I'd say right now I'm going to go with the Thunder. I do think Karl Anthony Towns is going to be back come playoff time for the Timberwolves, and there's a very good defensive team. I just think that Thunder squad just a bit on the younger side. You get to play the really experienced Lakers. A lot of these guys have been in very deep playoff runs. I think it's something that we saw just last year with the Memphis Grizzlies. I think that Thunder team's kind of comparable to that for the Lakers. That's why I think they want to see them.
Yeah, I think Timberwolves or Thunder. Timberwolves, I don't trust their decision-making down the stretch of games, but the Thunder, they're 1-4 against the Lakers this year. Lakers have an advantage in that matchup with their size, but stay where you are. We'll be right back with the A-Game.
It's time for another segment of Bear Down Bets on the A-Game. Over the next few minutes, I'll be breaking down some bets as well as some overall betting tips you can use over the next couple of weeks. Before we get started, though, remember to always be careful betting. Only bet what you can afford to lose. Now, the NBA playoffs are now just days away. That means that the major awards are being announced soon. Let's take a look at who I'm betting on to win some of them. First of all, the MVP. This is going to Nikola Jokic, and it's really not that close. There are other guys in the mix with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Luka Doncic, but right now Jokic is averaging once again a near triple-double. And if you're an advanced stats kind of guy, he's one of the best we've ever seen. And the biggest thing right now that's giving Jokic the huge go-ahead against guys like Shai is winning isn't a factor for Shai anymore because the Nuggets just leapfrogged the Thunder in the West. So the big thing for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was his team's better. His team has won more games. That's not the case as of right now. So it looks like Jokic is going to run away with this one. The second one we're going to look at is Rookie of the Year. This is another one that's really not a close race. This one is going to Victor Wembanyama. Wembanyama has been fantastic. He already has a 40-point game under his belt. The last few weeks he's had multiple 30-point games. He's honestly in the mix for Defensive Player of the Year, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Wembanyama has been an absolute freak on both sides of the court. It's ridiculous to think that this is probably the worst we're going to see him in the next 15 years in the NBA. He's really all he's cracked up to be, and he's going to win Rookie of the Year. The only next guy in that race, Chet Holmgren. Holmgren, a similar player, hasn't been nearly as good as Wembanyama has been. Therefore, Wembanyama has that one locked up. Now, Most Improved Player, this one a little bit more of a race. We're getting closer. The guys, Tyrese Maxey, and someone who's really been rising lately is Coby White. I lean on Maxey here. Maxey is averaging 6 more points per game than he did last season. He's doubled his assists per game this season. And a huge thing for Tyrese Maxey this year is the fact that Joel Embiid has been injured for the second half of this season. Maxey's usage has gone up a lot, and he's played very, very well in those moments. So I like Tyrese Maxey here. And then we're going to look at Defensive Player of the Year. Like I mentioned, Victor Wembanyama, the rookie, is in this race. I like Rudy Gobert. Gobert, the big thing about him is you do have to pay attention. You do have to watch these games to see why Rudy Gobert is so great in the paint. When you look at just stats such as blocks and steals, Wembanyama actually has been playing better as far as those stats go than Rudy Gobert has. But Rudy Gobert has been great in the paint. His defensive rating is the best in the NBA, and it's not particularly close. So Rudy Gobert, a guy that we're going to talk about in years to come about being a potential Hall of Famer, as he's won so many Defensive Player of the Years. And I think this is another one. let's move on to the coaches. We're going to look at coaches of the year. The big candidates right now, the Thunder's Mark Daigneault, the Timberwolves' Chris Finch, and the Magic's Jamal Mosley. All three of these guys have their teams performing up to their ceiling right now. There are three teams that have made huge jumps this season. The Timberwolves are at the top of the West. OKC's at third. The Magic are fighting for one of the top spots in the East, which not a lot of people expected going into this year for really all three of those. All those teams are playing at their ceilings. My pick for Coach of the Year, even though it's close, is Mark Daigneault for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And that's because the Thunder, they're a young team, and they're doing as well as they are. Other than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, all of the players on this Thunder team, for the most part, are before their prime. So the fact that Daigneault has them contending for the top spot in the West already, that's huge, speaks volumes for him. Now, Sixth Man of the Year, this is another one where it's going to be between two guys. You have Malik Monk and Naz Reid. Outside of that, you have a couple of other guys. Norman Powell's one of them, but it's a two-man race between Monk and Reid. Right now, Malik Monk's usage in this season has been a bit more. His stats are a bit better than Naz Reid. Reid has been great from behind the arc, but Monk has been a better player. That being said, Malik Monk got injured 5 games before the end of the season, 5 or 6. So Malik Monk hasn't been really boosting those stats recently and won't towards the end of the regular season, with this being a regular season award. I'm going to go with an underdog who is Naz Reid. Reid, you get plus money for him, and I like him here just because he's been on fire the last few weeks, behind the arc and everywhere else. So I like Naz Reid to really make a case while Malik Monk is injured, and I like Naz Reid. I'm going to take him to win Sixth Man of the Year. That will do it for this week's segment of Bear Down Bets on the A Game. Have fun watching this baseball season and NBA playoffs, and of course, always bet responsibly, but have some fun doing so. We're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. Kinsey, Andrew, and Holland are going to break down some current App State sports seasons to this point on the other side.
Welcome back to the A Game. I'm Andrew Travers.
I'm Kinsey Porter.
And I'm Holland James. This week, we're going to be taking the Mountaineers to the mat. The first topic we're going to be talking about is App State wrestling. Recently, they just capped off their season at the end of March, and App State took 5 qualifiers to the NCAA tournament, and they ended up capping off another successful season and continuing John Mark Bentley's successful run as head coach of the wrestling team as his 15th season, and setting a program record for first round wins this year as well. That's something that was very exciting to see after it was all said and done, with 8 total wins, a lot of upsets, and 3 of those wins coming within the final 16. Appalachian's very own Tommy Askey showed up during his final performance as a Mountaineer. For the record, I actually ran into him while I was working at Taco Bell shift. He came in and placed the order on the kiosk, and I didn't really waste much time to greet him and congratulate him on such a successful season. and let me tell you, he was just such an outstanding, approachable, and polite guy. So he was very fun to talk to. So again, shout out Tommy Askey. Tommy, if you're watching this, what's up, brother? But he started off 3-1 on the mat, and leaving him as one of 12 wrestlers in the 157-pound bracket, propelling him into the blood round against 8-seeded Nebraska's Peyton Robb, and unfortunately he fell short after a 9-4 decision. Askey's run to the blood round featured 2 wins against higher-ranked opponents and accounted for 3 of App State's 8 victories in Kansas City. Some other notable matches: Ethan Oakley and Cody Bond, both with 2 wins each in their matches, and Will Miller winning in the first round as number 18 seed. And then true freshman Thomas Booker, and he competed twice as the number 33 seed, and those are all the 5 players that went to the NCAA tournament, and I want to congratulate all of them on a wonderful performance. Great job, guys. Under Bentley's direction in the past 10 seasons, App State has a 66-6 record in their conference, ranking among the best in league Power 5 in Division I ranking. 12 victories against Power 5 schools, Duke, Carolina, Indiana, Oregon State. So yeah, it's very exciting to see that at the end of March. Kenzie, you've been keeping up with baseball this season. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so the baseball team's actually playing tonight at home against UNC Asheville, so everybody wish them good luck. And they played this past weekend at James Madison, which resulted in a loss, but that's okay. The team's overall record is 18-11. They're 9-2 home and 9-9 away. As far as conference record, they're 5-7. But to go into more specific things, there's two players that I've noticed that are really standing out in multiple different aspects of the game. We've seen that leading in the batting average, in runs scored as well as hits are Austin St. Laurent and Banks Tolley, which is very impressive to me. In the runs, Austin has scored 42 runs and Banks has scored 36. And then shifting back to leads and hits, Austin has 47 and Banks has 42. And then also another aspect as far as home runs, I've seen that CJ Boyd has scored 11 home runs as well as Banks. So it seems like they're really taking off as far as the game. Coming up this weekend, they'll be playing Troy, who are ranked 5th in the conference, while App is ranked currently 8th. So that'll be interesting, I think, to see how they play, and if they were to win, how that will shift where they're at as far as the conference. Just a recap, last season they finished the conference as 6th, so I think they're in a good position to gain some leverage there in increasing where they end up, but there's still a lot of good games left in the season that they have the potential to grow. But Andrew, do you want to shift into softball for us?
Absolutely. So softball season is well underway. A different type of diamond from baseball, but App State currently sits at 11th place in the Sun Belt Conference, and a tough Sun Belt Conference, I might add. They're 15-19 overall, and they have a 3-9 record in conference. And I think that really speaks to the competition so far in the Sun Belt. App State is riding a 9-game losing streak, but it's not entirely their fault. They played good teams that are ranked nationally, like Louisiana, who's ranked number 24th in the nation right now, and then Texas State, who's ranked 23rd in the nation right now. Louisiana is undefeated in Sun Belt Conference play as well, with a 12-0 conference record. Their offense has been a bright spot in the Sun Belt. They're top 5 in batting average, slugging percentage, and on-base percentage, which really bodes well for their hitters. Freshman Grace Barrett has struck out just 3 times in 105 at-bats and appearances at the plate. That leads the conference. Taylor Thorpe recorded her 100th career hit in a March 29th game against Louisiana, who was ranked at the time. You had junior Addie Ray, who also reached that milestone just a few days earlier on March 16th. Peyton Darnell, had a 2-hit game this past Sunday, extending her hitting streak to 7 games. She is just 2 hits away from 200 career hits as a Mountaineer, which is a really big milestone for her, and just to add to the accomplishments that Thorpe and Ray have already set for this program. Senior Delaney Buckner has been the leading pitcher in the circle for the Mountaineers. She has a 4.08 ERA to go along with only 21s allowed, 49 hits allowed, 29 strikeouts, and as well as 8 walks. So she's really been getting it done in the circle for the Mountaineer pitching staff. To go along with that, senior pitcher Kaylee Northrup has become the 10th player in program history to reach 200 career strikeouts. It's a really rare feat, and that's a great accomplishment for her on the season. So just wanted to give a hand to her on that one. And that she achieved that this past Sunday in the series against South Alabama, which App State unfortunately lost all 3 games to a talented South Alabama squad who has really got some talent on their roster, so not an easy team to play against, similar to Texas State and Louisiana. And then another thing I'll point out about the Mountaineers is their head coach, Shelly Horner, who has been with the Mountaineers for 7 seasons now. She sits 7 wins away from 700 career wins. She will become the first, or she actually became the first App State head coach to reach 150 career wins after the Mountaineers beat ETSU on March 11th. So congratulations to Shelly Horner on reaching that milestone, and then obviously coming close to 700 career hits. That's a big time accomplishment for a well-respected coach in Division I softball. So despite the Mountaineers' unfortunate losses in games and competition this season, they've seen many individual and team successes. But like I mentioned, the Sun Belt Conference this season is very talented. They have some ranked teams in there. So competition has been very hard to come by, but still that doesn't overshadow the successes that App State has seen offensively and defensively as a team and individually. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the A Game. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at @TVInsta.